Good humans! Today we are live. This is my first day streaming live. So I'm going to pause just a little bit just to make sure that I got everything figured out because this is my first time already. So hold on a moment. Looking good? Mhm. All right. Alrighty. So we are good to go. Today we are on Facebook and YouTube. Good evening, good humans. I hope everybody is having a chill and calm Christmas Eve. My name is Lydia, and we are on Lydia Waigi live on Facebook and Lydia Waigi's Way on YouTube. So there have been so many new subscribers to my channel, and so I'd like to give a brief welcome to everybody. Thank you very much for subscribing to my channel. I am a mother, a nurse, a friend, a daughter, a sister. I love the title Mama the most. I am raising one son. He's 8 years old. He has, amongst many things, he loves fire trucks, emergency vehicles, everything emergency vehicles, monster trucks, bubbles. He loves technology. He has the diagnosis of spinal muscular atrophy. It's a neuromuscular condition which causes loss of muscle strength. Okay. Um, Before we got the diagnosis, there had been no medication to treat this condition. But shortly after we got the diagnosis, there is a new medications that have come up, and so he's been getting those medications, and we have noted market improvement in his muscle strength. Alrighty. So today, I am going to give a behind journey of pregnancy, the symptoms that I noticed, and then we'll go to how we got the diagnosis and after the diagnosis. Okay. Now, nobody should feel pity on us. My son is thriving, he's doing good. The purpose of this video is because albeit this country, at least in America and Europe, some of Canada, a little bit of some Asian countries having medication for treatment for SMA, there's still so many places that don't have access to medication. And hopefully, amongst many things, this video will create awareness of spinal muscular atrophy and be a little bit of part of the advocacy to spread the reach of medication for SMA to everywhere in the world, all the clients in the world. And then also for just any parent who might notice symptoms such as the ones my son had, at least to have some cognition that it could be something like SMA, even if it's not SMA, and then to get some help. Okay. Now, I will start by saying, if I know my parents might watch this, and anybody who's older, if you feel this is too much FYI information, just know that it's part of why I need to give this. Okay, so let's get in. Let's get right in. So I got pregnant in 2016 February, and um, this pregnancy was amazing because I had been trying to get pregnant for a while. I didn't have a good menstrual cycle, so it was virtually impossible for me to get pregnant for a long while. And we'd given up on that venture with the doctor for a long while. Okay. And so, and I also have a cold, so if I sound a little stuffy, that's because of it. Okay. So that is number one. And so this was amazing because it was nowhere in the radar at all. And this particular year, when people make resolutions, mine was not a resolution making. I had quietly prayed to God to give me patience, to increase me in patience. I had worked in ICU for a long time, and the reason I worked there is because the patients in ICU are calm, quiet, and you can be able to plan and organize yourself, and there's no room for you to get impatient. Okay. So in my virtue that year, I wanted God to increase me in patience. And I think God did hear my prayer, and he was like, yo, I have got just the right person for you to make sure that you increase in patience in leaps and bounds. Okay, so my pregnancy journey was not too different than any other pregnancy. You know, it was first trimester, same old, nausea, vomiting. I loved nectarines, I loved fruits, and nectarines seemed to be what sorted my nausea and vomiting. Second trimester, I landed into a little bit of towards the end, I had abnormal heart rate. It just came out of the blues. One day I was sleeping and then my heart rate just shot to 120 and stayed up there for a long time, 140, 150 thereabouts. So the doctors investigated that. I had a heart monitor for a while, and that did not pick up anything abnormal. So it happened, it used to come and go, come and go, come and go. Okay, so it didn't affect the child, my baby. It was just a high heart rate that came and went, and so I lived with it. And then the third trimester, now in hindsight, towards the end, the fetal movements were markedly reduced. Now I used to work night shift, so my baby used to sleep in the day with me, and then in the night he's more active. Okay, so even when we used to go for prenatal clinics, for the better part in the day he'd be chill, and then in the night he'd wake up. But for the last trimester, the fetal movements were so reduced, and I remember thinking to myself, my baby has been quiet. I haven't had him moving for a while, and I drink orange juice, and then he'd continue playing. But I should have picked up that there was a problem. But you know, my hours were also a little off, so I didn't. Even when I brought it up to the doctor, it was just all right. As long as they play when they play, that's okay. So went in to give birth on November. I was working night shift, and so I was to report to night shift this particular Sunday, and then I went into labor. Or my water broke, and so I went into the hospital. It was a pretty straightforward delivery. I didn't have many problems, and so I gave birth. There was no episiotomy, and so the night that I spent there was pretty mellow. You know, my baby was breastfeeding. I had adequate milk, even on that first night. I didn't have any concerns that would keep us in the hospital at all. And so after giving birth that Sunday at 4 p.m., the following day, I was sent home. And so I went home with this little human. Now, when you do come live, please say hello. Say hello so that I can see how you're doing, and if you can see me and if you can hear me. Alrighty? Welcome to my live. Welcome, welcome. And so I went home the following day, which now would be a Monday. It really was an easy peasy going home. And so at this time, I was still in a relationship, and I went home. Thank you. Thank you, Shiko. I can see you. I think I saw Karashiro also. Thank you very much for joining my live. And so I went home. And so after going home, the first thing that I noticed was when we went for our prenatal clinics, it was a couples clinic, you know, and they bunched a lot of us who were pregnant at the same time. And we went on this journey for 9 months up until the end. Okay. So in this clinic, it was the last month, you know, they advised you what to do and what not to do with the baby. They had advised that the babies should sleep on the back and not on the side. But my son could not tolerate the back position, to lie on his back. He had a constant gaggle of secretions. As a healthcare person, as a nurse, it kind of, you know, red flags, because you shouldn't have secretion control problems from the get-go. And so quite early I was concerned, but he couldn't lie on the back at all. And it was bad because even breastfeeding, you know, when you're breastfeeding your child and he's this hold here, he couldn't tolerate that, and I had to use the football hold here and rotate him to the side. That one he used to tolerate much better. On the side here, football hold on the side and rotate him. But the one for in front here, I think his neck used to kink in a way that he's not able to breathe very well. Okay, so early on from day one, he had secretion control problems. Now, I want to add that my baby was a small baby. Well, a small baby for this country. I'm small myself, so I don't know if I got a baby who was 3 pounds, or 6 pounds, where they would have passed through. So 2.5 kilograms, 5 pounds by this country, was a small baby. And so what the doctor had said is I have to go in every single week for a weigh-in, to make sure that he gains weight, he upward trend, and until I think it was about a month. And if he gained weight to optimally, then I'd stop going in every week. So every week that I went in, these concerns that I am seeing, I kept bringing them up with the doctor. So first problem, secretion control was a problem, and it was a problem enough that I could hear he's blocked, he's congested. And I would do, when you turn on the shower and there's a lot of steam. That's what I used to do. And I used to need to do that 3 times in a day. And I used to use, that small ball bulb that you get in the children's area in the store. I used to use that to sections secretions, and I used to remove a lot. So right away, I knew there was a problem with secretion control. I didn't know what it was, but it definitely, I knew there was a problem. The other thing was his chest it wasn't like a rounded shape, a normal rounded rib cage. It had like dense and depressed and looked shrunken. And I remember thinking to myself, he was term, because I gave birth at 39 weeks, 4 days. So I knew he was term. So it wasn't that his lungs were not mature. I knew they were mature. Nathan, can you reduce that volume, please? Thank you, young sir. I appreciate it. So I knew his lungs were mature. For me not to be noticing this chest shape was different. It was different enough for me to be concerned that the rib cage looks different. And I kept bringing it up again. That was another concern that I brought to you. Remember, I'm seeing the doctors weekly, so I'm keeping bringing these things up. The other thing is he had kyphosis, C-spine. He had a hunchback pretty early on. It was noticeable pretty early on because he was a small baby, remember. So he was not too fluffy. So his spine curve was noticeable. And if you sat him up, he had a little bit of a scoliosis already that early. So I noticed these problems. And then his breathing was different. It started early. His breathing was different because he would breathe with his stomach. He was an abdominal breather, and instead of the chest coming out and breathe when he's breathing, it's the stomach that would do the work when he was breathing. And I kept telling the doctors there's something not right. But when you're a first-time parent, it's very difficult to get someone maybe to understand that there's something wrong. But the healthcare person in me knew something was off, and I couldn't quite picture what. Okay, so the breathing only got worse. So initially, aside the secretion control, the breathing, aside it being abdominal, it got continuously worse. And he had, when he was sleeping, especially is when I'd noticed it, he had very shallow breaths, and he'd have pauses. And these pauses started early. And they do say children have pauses as they adjust into the outside world, but these pauses were long pauses. And as we got on month 1, month 2, month 3, the pauses only got longer. I mean, shallow breathing and the pauses getting longer, so you can tell he's not breathing enough for me to want to startle him, to get him to breathe more. So that was another thing. And then the breastfeeding. I was very determined to breastfeed for X amount of years my baby. So I had milk from the get-go. I was very prepared in that area, and I had ample milk. And initially, my baby would breastfeed with ease, but as the months went by, month 1, month 2, month 3, when you start breastfeeding, initially the child wakes up every 2 hours, which is what he was doing. And then as they get older, the duration in the night should lengthen so that they can sleep more. And the hope is that by the end, they'll drop off night feeds and they only feed in the day. Now, it was opposite for my baby. He started off breastfeeding well, and he'd wake up every 2 hours. But as the months went by, he'd keep on waking up. He was hungry, like every 1 hour, my baby's hungry again. And it's not hungry, not like hungry, hungry. And so I kept thinking, what's happening here? And when he would breastfeed, he'd breastfeed for a short time and then get tired. His breathing was not coordinating. You know, children end up breathing, they coordinate breathing and breastfeeding. He was not able to do the two, so he was tiring quickly. So he was taking short time to breastfeed, so he wasn't getting enough nutrition, and then he'd wake up more frequently. Eventually, by the time we got to month one, two, by month three, thereabout, man, I'd have to breastfeed like every 20 minutes. The only savior at that time is that the letdown for breast milk was a lot. So he'd be able to get milk flowing quickly. So there was that. The other thing was, you know, when you're changing a child's diaper and they're playing, their legs are up and their hands are up and they're playing and they're doing all these things. My son never used to do that. His legs always used to be in the frog position on the bed, and his hands never used to move much. So that was the other thing that I noticed. And then his general energy, general oomph was not there. You know, most children cry with a lot of oomph, a loud cry, but my baby didn't have that. It was a weak, shrill cry, very different from others. And I noticed that especially when we went for the immunizations. And I remember one nurse asking, "Is that how he cries?" But there was nothing to point to anything else, despite my concerns. Okay. The other thing was neck. His neck wasn't strong. Most children, babies that young, their necks are not strong anyway. But this one was a little different. You know, he couldn't hold his neck at all. And by the time it got to month one, again month three, thereabout, you know, when you hold your baby here, he'd like flop back, like he should fall back. His neck would fall back, his whole back would fall back. So I had to hold the whole length of him when I'm holding him here. That was a little different because his neck was really weak, like really weak, and he'd flop on all sides. The other thing is, most children do. I don't know if most children love water, but Nathan loved water. Like, he'd have a bath for a long time. I'd have to keep adding water. But I didn't realize then that there is no gravity in water. So if your muscles are weak when you're in water, it's freedom. So he used to love, bath time was a happy time. I used to do many baths and used to enjoy them. But in hindsight, it was just SMA giving warnings that your muscles are not working and you're having more freedom when you're in the water because there's no SMA, there's no gravity in water. But he loved water, and but he still couldn't support himself in any way. So I had so many red flags, and remember, I'm seeing these doctors every single week, and so I'm keeping on bringing all these things up, but these doctors were not listening. So after month, when my baby was about 3 months, I left the situationship I was in, the relationship situationship I was in, and I left at that time because I left at that time. And so I had a small baby with me in my new apartment, hadn't even undone anything. And I also needed to go back to work at this time. So there was a lot going on. He was very unwell. I needed to see the doctors very frequently. He really is unwell. Circulation control got worse, breathing got worse, muscle strength diminished completely. And one day when I had left work, I went to pick him up from someone who used to watch him for me whilst I went back to work, because I needed to go back to work to pay bills. And when I went to pick him up in the evening, she told me I used to send him with milk, breast milk in a bottle, and frozen milk so she can thaw it. And she told me today he didn't feed at all. He just couldn't feed. And so when I picked him up, this was now after a 12-hour shift, day shift, he was hungry. So I remember sitting down immediately and breastfeeding him, because the milk is flowing easily. He's able to just swallow. And then I went home with him. This was around now, maybe April. So he was about November, December, January, February, about 4 months now. So I went home, but this particular night was different. One, he needed breastfeeding almost every 15 minutes. So that was a lot. So I had to stay. I literally sat up and held him the whole night. And then, so that was one. Two, he wasn't breathing. When I say not breathing, I mean very shallow breaths. And the pauses that I was saying was so long. Like I waited for one and it was like a minute or longer. I had to literally hold him and startle him to breathe stimulate him to breathe and feed him that whole night. And so that this particular night was different because of those two things. His breathing was very different, secretion control was a challenge, and he wasn't able to feed to get satiated, to get satisfied. So in the morning, and then he had lost all strength at this time. At this time, muscles were all weak. He only had a little bit of finger movement and a little bit of toe movement, but everything else there was no movement. So after this night, I struggled. I didn't want to go back to the ER because, believe you me, by the time it got to month 4, I had gone to the ER very many times because of secretions and the deep suction him. And I kept asking them, why are you deep suctioning? Is that not normal? You shouldn't need to deep suction a baby. They should be able to control their secretions. So I'd gone to the ER many times. So this particular night, I didn't want to go to the ER because they won't help me anyway. They were already dismissive because I've been there so many times. So the clinic I was in, I had already changed now also the primary care provider from the original one because they weren't listening to me. And because he had gained weight, I had moved to another one to see if they would listen to me. This one was a group of doctors. And unfortunately, even them, they didn't pick it up from my concerns. And by this particular night, he had lost, all that weight that I had been seeing them to gain for over a month. All that weight was out. Kapush. I mean, he had gone back to the small, incy, skinny boy. So this morning, I decided I'm going to the doctor. This doctor's clinic was a good clinic because they allowed you to walk in. They had a walk-in bit, 7 to, I think it was 9 or 10 o'clock, and you would walk in with any concerns. They had a provider there who would see you for walk-ins in the morning. 7 a.m. on the dot, I was there. They opened the door and I walked in. And so this day, those parents who you become the obstinate parent, I became that parent, let me tell you. Guy, I told this doctor, because I was the only one there, I told this doctor, let me tell you, me, I am not living here today. Today, you must tell me what is wrong with my son. You are not going to send me to an emergency room. I am going to stay here now that you have opened from morning to evening. I am staying right here. You are going to also send us for an MRI of the head to the toe. This is apparently morning. That morning I was done. And so she looked at me. This child is not feeding. I gave her all those concerns: the spine shape, the chest shape, the secretion control problems, the breathing concerns, the pausing in breathing, the breathing with the abdomen. He doesn't have strength. He's not moving his legs. He's not moving his. If you lift the leg, he just drops. If you lift the hand, he just drops. I'm like, this is not normal. So this lady doctor looked at me this day, and she said, I am not very sure I can do what you want today, but give me a minute. She went. She came back and she told me, from your concerns, I think he has this diagnosis. So she gave me a paper, Pierre-Robin syndrome. I quickly went on my phone. I looked it up. I was like, no, this doesn't describe my baby. It had about a high arch, roof arch, which he has, and a short lower jaw, which appeared at that time like he had. But any of those other concerns that I am mentioning, they were not there. So I told her, no, this is not it. And if it is it, I still need him to be scanned from the head to the toe, and do not send me to the emergency room. I am refusing. Whatever you do, you are going to do it when I'm here today. And I'm living here today with a diagnosis. You have opened when I am the first client. I'll be the last one to leave in the evening with something, a name of something, so that we know what we're dealing with. This doctor now looked at me and decided, okay, now what am I going to do with this parent? I was very obstinate. I had breast milk already. I fed my baby and I told her I am not living here. So she went again. She told me, give me another minute. She went out, she came back and she told me, I am not able to do what you want done here. What I will do, we will have him admitted to the local hospital here. A direct admit. I told him, I told her, don't send me to the ER. I'm not going to go. Get me a bed. So she got me a direct admit. So we were going to leave that office and go to the bed. That was the plan. So she got me a room number, gave me the name of the doctor I'm going to see, and told me, off you go. So I passed by home, picked more frozen breast milk because I still had many, picked my pump, and my baby packed up a few things and off we went. Now, when we got to this room, I think it was afternoon by then, I met a resident and who, asked me all these many questions. And then a lady doctor came in, Dr. Kelly. This doctor was different from the other doctors. Her approach was different. This doctor told me, I have looked through your son's file. I can see you were here the day before yesterday. I have notated all your concerns since you came here the first time. I have looked through your primary care provider and I have seen you have had the same consistent concerns. Now, forget about those prior visits to where you have visited. I want you to tell me from day zero when you left here with your baby, what you have been seeing, and I would now start a new timeline for you. So, in the meanwhile, she told me, give me your baby. She held my baby, and as I am talking, she is examining this boy. I remember her turning him, looking at the back. When I mentioned the back, when I mentioned the neck, she'd assess the neck. When I mentioned the breathing, she'd look at the breathing. When I mentioned secretion control, she'd listen to the secretions and the lungs. And when I mentioned leg weakness, she looked at the hands and the legs. This doctor was different. Her approach was very different this day. So I knew I was in good hands. So after I had given all my concerns with the timeline and everything, this doctor knew the diagnosis. She did not tell me though. She was very careful. She told me, we're going to do two things right now. One, here is a suction machine. You know how to operate this, I suppose. So she gave me a suction machine. She also called the respiratory therapist and he brought me suction catheters. She told me, I want you to suction. And she gave me the particular length from the nose to the throat that I'll be able to clear secretions. So she gave me that. Now I was able to clear his airway. And then she told me we're going to feed him, but since the swallowing and the neck muscles are not very strong, we're going to put an NG tube, and it goes from the nose to the gastric to the stomach. And that way you have breast milk. Yes, I have breast milk. You're going to tube feed him X amount of milk. How frequently? So I was sorted out because I had airway secure now, and I was able now to give food and make sure that the food is reaching my baby and he's able to get food every 2 hours. So then she said, we're going to draw labs and we're going to send these labs for, I didn't even ask what the labs were for. Those I just trusted. They were just basic labs, regular hemoglobin, kidney function, regular function. So I never asked what they were for. I just trusted the labs will go, there'll be the labs, they should come and tell me what the results are. And then she said, we're going to do an MRI. We're going to do an MRI. I will consult with a neurologist and I'll let you know what the MRI, where we are going to target the skull for. So see, now I'm sorted. We got the admit. We're going to stay for the night. I'm going to start nutrition. Airway is sorted out. Labs are taken. And then she said, the last thing she said was, I want you to see I'm going to consult neurology because I think we need to see a neurologist. But I'm hoping that you'll be able to see the one who comes tomorrow morning and not the one who's on call tonight because she's been very busy. I'm hoping you'll be able to see the one in the morning. So I was cool to wait because anyway, we were going to be there. So no pressure at all. So she had a swing shift. So she was going to leave at about, I think it was about 8 o'clock ish or 7. Anyway, whatever shift she was going to leave, she left. And so I was left with a way to clear secretions. I'm able to feed my baby. So now I was waiting for the neurologist the following morning. The labs have gone. I'm in no pressure to get the results because if there's a problem, they will come and tell me. So 7 p.m. on the dot, I remember it like clockwork. I had just fed my baby breast milk and I was holding him. I used to sing to Nathan a lot, so I was holding him. And in comes a provider alone. She came in alone, not with a nurse, nobody accompanying her. Walked in alone. These were her words to this mother who's holding her baby standing. She said, "Your son has spinal muscular atrophy." Me, I'd never heard of SMA before, so I didn't know what she was meaning. I only knew she's already said spinal muscular atrophy. Doesn't sound like something good. Your son has spinal muscular atrophy. It is a lethal disease. He is going to live 12 to 18 months. You're going to go home and love on your baby. This is a huge diagnosis I have given you. Go on Google and read about it. And off she went. Hiya. So now me, I was left holding my baby, looking at my son, and I started crying. And I remember at this particular point calling myself a meeting. You know, the way you call yourself a meeting, I call myself a meeting. I was like, stop crying. The baby needs you, needs your attention. So I quickly gathered myself together. I've called myself a meeting, gathered myself together. And then I continued, made sure he had slept, and put him to bed. Now, this doctor, remember, came alone and left alone. Nobody followed in like a nurse to check in what has happened. Me, I was left in shock. So I just started crying after my baby had slept. I looked up SMA on the internet. The medications for SMA, this is now 2017 when I'm getting their diagnosis in April. The medications for SMA, the first one had been approved in December, Christmas Eve, the year before, 2016, when I was giving birth to my baby in November. So the information that I got on Google did not have any hope of any treatment. All I saw was that my baby would lose all muscle movement, even the breathing, would need a tracheostomy, would need feeding, whatever with the tube. And so I remember looking up at this point and telling God, Yani, really, really, really? You have been preparing me working in ICUs for this long, for this little person. Ungenipea a warning. Give a mother a warning. Give me a warning that this is what you're bringing my way. And if this is what you have decided, then give me the grace, give me the strength, give me the peace to take care of this baby so that they can live and thrive for however long I'm going to have this baby. So I made that resolution at that particular point. But when I was crying, I called my mother. Me, I don't cry very easily. I work in ICU. My heart is almost a brick of stones. Because if you cry in ICU when you lose a patient, you will cry forevermore. So I am very hardcore. So when I called my mother crying, my mother was worried immediately. She's like, this one does not cry. What is the problem? So she listened to my concern and immediately gathered my small sister. My small sister called Shko was doing her master's at that point, and they immediately reorganized themselves. And she took a flight to here immediately. Now this I think was April, maybe 19th thereabout, or 17th, 17th I think. Anyway, one of those days there. I'm a little bit blurry on those days. I think I was just operating on adrenaline. So anyway, when I called them that day when I was in the hospital, my sister took a flight and came the following day. Now, the following day when the doctor, when morning came, I never slept that night. I was so stressed that night because all I am seeing on the internet was just doom. And I fed my baby that night. So he was well taken care of. So in the morning came, Dr. Kelly came back. This time, she came back with a different neurologist. And so I explained to them what I had been told amidst my lots of tears. This neurologist did damage control. This neurologist told me, well, I am very sorry about that, but there is new treatment for spinal muscular atrophy. But before he got to the treatment, he explained to me, your son has spinomuscular atrophy. I will tell you why I am sure about this before the test results are out. Now, in came Dr. Kelly and said, yes, the labs we took yesterday, aside basic hemoglobin and kidney function, I also sent out for a genetic result test for spinomuscular atrophy, because from your explanation of the concerns you had, it was very clear it was spinal muscular atrophy. So I didn't want to tell you them because I wanted the neurologist to be the one to tell you. So now they tell me it is spinal muscular atrophy. Amongst the many things I hadn't noticed is he has tongue fasciculations. If you watched my videos, the one that I do on diagnosis and treatment, I did a small video in there of tongue fasciculations, a slight tremor of of the tongue. And so the neurologist told me, compounded with your history and the symptoms that he has, the tongue fasciculations and the muscle weakness increasing up to now, to where he is now, he's not able to move. Those are very characteristic of spinal muscular atrophy. So even as we await the genetic result, I am very sure he has spinal muscular atrophy. So then he told me, now there is new medication for spinal muscular atrophy. It was approved last year by the FDA. There was only one center at that time when they started the medication, Seattle Children's, that was doing this particular medication, Spinraza. It was done through the spine, like an LP through the spine. And so he told me the genetic results will go directly to Seattle Children's. You'll get a call from the doctor, and you will need to transfer your care from here to Seattle Children's, because that is the only place where it's doing Spinraza right now. And since we have set you up with everything right now, the only thing we're going to add on is get you an equipment provider, what they call a DME, a durable medical equipment provider, so that we can make sure that when you're going home, you have formula for your baby on top of your breast milk, which you have ample of. You have suction equipment, and then you have all the supplies that you need to do the suctioning to clear the airway. And as soon as 2 weeks are up for the genetic results, might be sooner, you'll get a call from Seattle Children's. So with that, now I was a little calmer. Even though I was stressed, I had already made peace with this diagnosis for my son, and I was already determined that from now on, in our pity party, we're going to live a life that he's going to thrive as best as I can for as long as I have my baby. So discharge came, and I went home, and I had all the equipment that I needed. Now it was waiting for 2 weeks. My baby sister joined me, and so now we are waiting for 2 weeks. Now these 2 weeks were the longest 2 weeks of my life, because I'm waiting for the results. But then also, remember I told you before we went in, he was already weak. Now these 2 weeks, my God, they were the longest 2 weeks we had, because his breathing got worse and worse and worse, like worse. Like those pauses that I was saying, they just kept getting longer and longer and longer. We used to literally hold this baby day in, day out for him to breathe. What I didn't notice also, because I guess I was with him all the time, is he was breathing very rapidly. And then the secretion control was horrible. Even though I used to do steaming like 3 times a day, and even in the night, the secretions were just many. You could hear them. He didn't need to be breathed. You could hear them as soon as you walked near him. You could hear the gargles. There was just a lot of junk and gunk in there. And remember, I have suction, and still it's not clearing, because I could only, through the nose, you can only go so far. You can't go any deeper. So this last night, when we got the call to go from Seattle Children's, and they were very quick. Once they got the results, they'd call you immediately and plan for you to go in immediately to meet the team. When I said team, remember I said the initial medication was given through the spine. So when I said team, you're going to meet an anesthetist, who's the one who will be dealing with making sure that they put in the LP in the right place. you meet the rehab doctor, who is the one who used to call us. You meet a neurologist, and you meet a respiratory team, a pulmonologist who will help manage the airway. So we got our appointment date. This last night before we went was one hell of a long night, because I remember we couldn't sleep. I'd hold him, then my sister would hold him, then I would hold him. My sister would hold. His breathing was almost non-existent. Oh my God. The most difficult thing with spinal muscular atrophy is watching your baby lose muscle strength every single day, get worse and worse and worse, shut down, literally. In this case, now at this point, when we were getting our last day to go in, his respiratory system was quite literally going off, shutting off as I was watching. The fortunate thing about SMA, it doesn't affect the diaphragm, so he still had that abdominal breathing, but it was shallow, it was labored, it was fast because he was not getting enough air. It was bad. Now, we went in on I can't remember which day exactly it was, but we had the results then that it was SMA, and so we got our date check-in. Now, me, I didn't think we were going to stay. Me, I thought we are going to see the team, meet the team. It was you had many appointments. You're going to start with anesthetist, was the first one. You see pulmonology, you see neurology, so it was a whole day. So I knew we would be there all day, but I did not anticipate we would stay the night there. Where? Hey. So we went in. First person we see anesthetist. Anesthetists are pretty good at being very calm in their face, even though they're panicking. Apparently, from the anesthetist perspective, my son was really bad, needed to be in the OR with a tracheostomy being done there and then. But he kept his cool. We did the x-ray that was supposed to be done. He looked at the x-ray, he examined my son, he asked his questions, and so he told us the next doctor you're going to see is the pulmonologist. In between the anesthetist and the pulmonologist, there was a kid like a 2-hour break or a 1.5-hour break. So me, because of working in hospital, I didn't want to stay in the hospital. I told my sister, let us go for a drive up here. Anyway, I'd never been to Seattle Children's before. Let us go for a drive and get out of the hospital. So, 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 um, off we went for a break. After we went for a break, in between our going, I got a call. Come back to the hospital urgently. So we came back to the hospital very urgently, and apparently the breathing was worrying enough for the anesthetist to have the pulmonologist see us immediately. So after the pulmonologist walked in, this doctor looked at me, looked at my son, asked a few questions, and told me and my sister, follow me. We walked immediately right there and then to the emergency room. It was like a trauma room. There was all this, a whole team of people waiting. She put him on a breathing machine. It was BiPAP, the one they put on the face. And she said, we are going to try this. If he tolerates this, we are not going to do the tracheostomy. And we're going to give him a chance because we've also been cleaning his chest, so he's a little bit ahead. But his breathing was very fast. But as soon as they put the mask on this boy, he slept and he relaxed and he chilled out. And so I was like, okay, since now we're in hospital, we ended up now going to the ICU. We stayed in the hospital for 3 months, a whole month. That one day stay ended up being a whole month stay in the ICU. This child had a Niagara Falls of secretions. Since now he had a breathing machine, the airways were opening. He had a fountain after fountain. They suctioned and suctioned and suctioned and suctioned. Why? There were so many secretions. It was unbelievable. They sectioned so many secretions. Amidst all that, they started now the medication for spinal muscular atrophy, Spinraza at that time. And because it was a lumbar puncture, they used to take him to the OR. You get 4 loading doses, a dose a week, 4 of them. So 4 weeks of 4 loading doses, and then after that, you go to every 4 months. So we stayed in the hospital for those 4 loading doses, which was the whole month. And in the meanwhile, we cleaned his secretions. And then it was a long, exhausting month. Remember, I was not working at this time, so my paycheck is zero. Bills need to be paid. I'm very thankful for my family for running, gathering around me and paying bills. And it was a rough time because everything just fell apart. I didn't have work. I couldn't work anyway. And even if I went home, back home, which I eventually did, I couldn't still work because I couldn't leave my son in a regular daycare. I couldn't leave my son with just anybody with all this medical equipment now. So we stayed in for a whole month. Cleaning his chest was the most huge thing, making sure he gained weight, getting the 4 loading doses, and then setting up for more medical equipment, ventilators, oxygen, cough assist, shaky vest, so that we would have all this equipment and training on that medical equipment so that we would go. So that 1 month was a very busy month. And it was a stressful month. Things were falling apart quite literally in my life. So after the 1 month, and when we were ready to go home, we eventually did get ready and went home. But when we went home, I still couldn't work. The boy now had a ventilator to breathe, oxygen. I had to do respiratory therapy to make sure his airways were clean. We were sent home to set up with what they call birth to three intervention. From 0 to 3 years is run by the state, and they come with a physiotherapist, occupational therapist, a speech therapist, because he was non-verbal. He hadn't made words at all. And they'd come to my home to see him. And then we'd transition now from those ones to regular PTOT with the local hospital nearby. And so that is what we did. Transition back home. I still couldn't work for a long time because of that. And when we had eventually set up all these therapies, it was now also looking for nursing because we couldn't get nursing quickly. The nurses who were there in home health agencies to train to take care of this child were not so many. And so it took a while to get set up with a nurse. Anyway, eventually I did get home nursing, which has continued to this day. I ended up now being able to set him up with PT, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, because my son today is nonverbal. He does make noises, but he doesn't make words. So that's where now I started very early on to make sure that he had a way to communicate with a communication device. I don't know how these things come to your head when you have such a child, but it came to my head that I needed to set up speech and find a way for him to communicate with me even if he needed anything. So I set those up early. And then with physiotherapy, I started working on ways to mobilize him very early. But before we could do that, we needed to make sure he had strength. Now, remember, we went in with zero muscle movement at all. There was nothing. When we started Spinraza, he started gaining strength, the hands first. He was able to move the wrist a little bit, and then he was able to move the elbow a little bit. Not this way, but at least he could move it on a level place. And then eventually, with a lot of therapy with him, because if you don't use your muscles, you lose them. I'd sit him up, work on sitting up, and then that's where he became a lover of technology, because I used to put my phone in front of him to motivate him to hold his neck up. And it took maybe about 6 months for us to acquire neck strength to hold his head without it collapsing and falling off. And then work on sitting up, work on moving legs. It was a lot and intense range of motion exercises at home. It was a lot of physiotherapy, a lot of occupational therapy. We added on aqua therapy thereafter. It was a lot of therapy sessions to reacquaint muscles with moving again because they had lost everything. When I tell you everything, I mean things were quiet. There was no movement. And since now we had good airway clearance with BiPAP and the correct equipment, cough assist, he was eventually able to get away. He would breathe, and we worked gradually to increase the time of the medical equipment so that he could breathe independently on his own. Okay, but so the first year of taking care of Nathan was very intense. It was a lot of therapy sessions. It was a lot of PT, drives to therapy. It was intense in terms of medication. It was intense because the doctors also needed feedback on what he has gained, what he hasn't gained. It was intense because I didn't have a job now. Everything was falling apart. My bills were falling apart. Money was zero. I got zero paychecks for a couple of many months. It was just an intense first year. I can tell you now, at least I can skip fast forward because the rest of these things I will do them in small sessions and give updates. Um, right now, Nathan from zero movement up to now, he is able to go to school independently with a power chair. He is able to drive a power chair independently, safely load into my car, safely load into the school bus, offload himself from the school bus and go to school. He does go with a school nurse to help with managing the airway secretions. But independently, this child can drive his power chair to and from. I can go with him to the store and not worry that he's going to bump into. I mean, I can go with him to the aquarium. I can go with him to the museum. He drives himself independently. So he has done very well. Secretion control, he still needs a lot of ventilator support for at night. Even to this day at night, when his breathing is still very shallow and he still have very many pauses, so he still needs the ventilator fully at night, but in the day he can get breaks and tolerate them pretty good. Initially we did nasal suctioning and I was able to go deeper than the initial when I didn't have a lot of therapy. But eventually, at about 6 years, we needed to put a tracheostomy in to clear his secretions more because he started refusing nasal sectioning. It's uncomfortable. I understand that. Okay. And then, so he's able to mobilize, he's able to clear his own oral secretions. He has a way to suction himself orally. I introduced that early because when I used to drive on appointments and go out, I would have to stop the appointment if it is in Seattle Children's and I'm living here. I would have to stop every half an hour to suction, or every 15 minutes you'd hear the secretions increasing. So I'd have to stop to suction. So very early on, I knew I had to find a way for him to start suctioning himself so that the drives for appointments would not be so long. If I had an appointment at 2 p.m., I'd start my drive at 12 because I will be stopping along the way to suction his oral secretions. The oral secretions, these muscles in here have never woken up fully for him to be able to swallow or to be able to control, drool fully and swallow. So his secretion control still needs suction to suction orally, but they were still not. We ended up having to do surgery to remove his salivary glands so that he doesn't have so much drool, so that it is not he is able to manage some secretions. Otherwise, it was unmanageable completely. And so, independent in moving, independent breathing on his own somewhat. He can move his hands fully. He used to be able to lift them up, but when we put much across again, but he can move his hands enough for him to use an iPad to communicate. So he uses a communication device, AAC device. So that's what he uses to communicate. There's one physical one that is for communication, but there's two apps that he uses on his iPads, and that's how he's able to say how he's feeling or what he's feeling. On top of that, he's able to do some sign language to be able to say, I am all done, I want more, or thank you, or please. I mean, he can do some sign language to be able to communicate. The fingers had not gained the dexterity, so now he's able to do I love you, but the fingers had not yet gained the strength to be able to be mobile enough to be able to do sign language, ASL, the proper ASL. But with the AAC device, he's able to go to school and communicate with his peers. He's still a tech geek because most of his education is computer based. So what he understands, he puts in the communication device, and that communication device transfers it to a Chromebook, and the Chromebook stores his knowledge so that there is a record that he communicated, he knew what he knew. So that's how he does school. And so he goes to school with a nurse every day, and the school district provides the nurse. And then he communicates with a Chromebook. So he's very techy from early on. And then he has the help of a para-educator with him all the time to make sure that he has access to the things are close enough. He has access to the device. He has access to the Chromebook. All those things are here, near, and dear. Okay. But otherwise, in terms of general movement, his legs have not gained the strength enough to stand, but they have gained enough the strength to be able to. He can lift the leg now from surface bed, he can lift the leg all the way up. Those were never there, let me tell you. We have celebrated these muscle gains inch stone by inch stone until they become a milestone. He's able to sit on himself, he's able to shift positions by himself, he's able to come forward, he's able to go back, he's able to move his core. Those things were not there at all, and so we have worked very hard, and he has put in a lot of work to be able to regain all those itty bitty things. Suffice all this to say, spinal muscular atrophy is a condition of is neuromuscular, so you will lose muscle strength. And my reason to do this video is not for pity at all, but it is to put the word out there, and hopefully a mother who ever has to go through this never has to go through the struggle of convincing people there is a problem. The other thing is that there is newborn screening now. So if anybody notices any of these symptoms and they're able to get treatment pronto, please make sure that you disturb the doctors and bug the doctors and be a squeaky wheel and advocate for your doctor. Change the doctors like I did if you have to, but don't give up on looking for a doctor who will listen to you to make sure that your child has access to early treatment as much as possible. Now, since I say there's newborn screening, at least for me in my family, since I am a carrier of SMA, for my sisters and my siblings, they will have to get tested when they want to start families so that they can make sure there is no, if they're carriers, then they will need to have their spouses tested to make sure that they are not also carriers. In other words, once you have one person with a diagnosis of SMA in the family, you might need to do testing for everybody else, your siblings, to make sure that their partners also are not carriers of SMA if they themselves are carriers. Okay, so that's number one. Awareness and making sure that you are ready to advocate for your child no matter what, and don't give up. You must be hard. And if it means shifting doctors like I did from Dr. A to Dr. B to Dr. C, please do that, because it is well worth it. And it doesn't matter whether it is just for SMA, for any other condition your child must have. If you feel in yourself as a mother something is wrong in your gut and you're not getting heard, don't be afraid to advocate. Be that squeaky wheel, you will get the grease with a provider. And then this is also to say that I am very thankful for the support I have had from my family. And part of doing these videos is also to give thanks to the subscribers who have joined on this journey, because this is a rare condition that not many people know, and I'm hoping that you will all champion for spinal muscular atrophy, for medication to have access in our country, Kenya. There are children in Kenya who have spinal muscular atrophy who do not have access to this medication. And when it comes to running that campaign so that we can get those children the therapy and the medication and treatment that my son has, I'm hoping that I am building a community enough for people to be able to do exactly that and rally behind us so that we can get those children treatment. Alrighty. And so appreciation to the healthcare team, appreciation to the nurses who care for Nathan, appreciation to my family for standing with me and for making sure that I don't lose my marbles, because you can lose marbles, but also just to bring awareness to spinal muscular atrophy, a condition that can be very debilitating, can be quite terminal if there's no treatment that is accessed. Now, Mumeskia, have you had? Are there any questions? If you have any questions and you are not able to ask them on this live, please follow them up here. Please share this live video so that other people can get to hear about this particular journey to the diagnosis of spinal muscular atrophy. Because remember, I said you don't get these symptoms all the same time, and that is what delays diagnosis, because the symptoms are so haphazard. And so there could be a parent somewhere who is going through what I was going through and does not know what to do. So please share this video widely. I am very, very, very thankful for you joining me on my first ever live video. And it was all about our journey to the diagnosis of spinal muscular atrophy. And my son is thriving. He's doing fantastic. I will keep doing videos. Hopefully I'll be able to vlog sometime soon on his daily adventures, how he gets around, how he communicates, the cares that we do here for him. But this was just the beginning. And I felt it's good to start by laying the foundation on where we are coming from so that where we are going will make some sense. Alrighty. Alrighty, good humans. Bye bye. Have a Merry Christmas, y'all. Thank you very much, all 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 of you for joining me. I am a very, very thankful mother for my first live session. God bless you all. Thank you very, very much. Have a very Merry Christmas. I'll hopefully come live again before it's in the Happy New Year. But for now, bye bye, good humans. God bless you all.